Born on December 24th, 1992, Darren Till would be an early Christmas gift to a family in Liverpool, England. However, Till would get into many fights whilst living in the city. This led him to start training in Muay Thai at the age of 12 years old. While it seemed like a young age in England, in Thailand he might as well be starting at 30. At 14, he dropped out of high school to better focus on the sport. He turned pro at 15 and started training in MMA at 17, joining Team Kaban. As a teen, Darren had a situation with his mother, forcing him to live in different places, like the gym or other relatives' houses. In August 2012, Till was at a party with his friends when a fight broke out. Some guys were fighting his friend, so Darren went to defend him. As he fought, someone from that group stabbed him in the back twice, puncturing his lung. It was reported that if the knife was a millimeter closer, then it would have hit a major artery, ending his life. So in order to keep him safe, Darren's head coach Colin Heron sent him to Brazil. There, Darren would train with former Caban coach. He then moved to Santa Catarina, where he joined Astra Fight Team. Although Darren had barely enough to afford an apartment, knew little Portuguese, and had minimal grappling experience, that wouldn't stop him from training to fight in mixed martial arts. Darren made his professional MMA debut at middleweight at Sparta MMA 3, facing Luciano Oliveira. He'd win the fight by unanimous decision. Darren had 8 more fights in just a year and a half, winning every one of those fights by way of stoppage, at one point even having a 6-fight knockout streak. He moved down to welterweight on November 24, 2014, winning 2 out of 3 fights by stoppage. At just 22 years old, Darren Till made his UFC debut on May 30, 2015, replacing TJ Waldberger on 9 days' notice. Wendell de Oliveira was his opponent at Fight Night 67. Their fight was the first fight on the main card, bringing over 800,000 viewers to Darren's debut. Wendell attempted a takedown, which Darren was able to reverse. He stayed on top before hitting him with multiple elbows, knocking Wendell out. His next fight would be his first pro fight outside of South America. He went to Ireland for Fight Night 76, fighting Nicholas Dalby. Though their back and forth fight won them fight of the night, the judges would score the fight as a majority draw. Darren would suffer a shoulder injury, putting him on the sidelines for some time. Along with personal issues, he'd be on the sidelines for over a year. During this time, Darren would return back to England and rejoin with Team Caban, being trained by Heron once again. He came back in 2017 at Fight Night 109 against Jason Ayari. At the weigh-ins, Darren Till would fail to make weight by 5 pounds, marking the first time that this would happen. Despite this and losing 20% of his purse, Darren would win the fight by unanimous decision. At Fight Night 115, Darren would face Bojan Velikovic, winning the fight by unanimous decision. He'd headline his first main event against WEC and UFC title challenger Donald Cowboy Cerrone at Fight Night 118. In round 1, the Cowboy would take down the Englishman, but Darren was able to get back up. He landed a hard 1-2 combo on Cerrone's chin, following it up with a flurry of punches. This was enough for the ref to stop the fight, giving Darren his 10th knockout win. Darren would then get the pleasure of being the first fighter to headline the UFC's first Liverpool card at Fight Night 130. His fight would be against 2-time UFC welterweight title challenger Stephen Thompson. Darren Till would miss weight again for the second and last time of his career, coming in 3.5 pounds over the limit. The fight would go the distance, with Darren getting his hand raised by way of unanimous decision. Now on a 5-fight win streak in the promotion, ignoring the draw, along with being the company's next big British star, the UFC would fuel Darren's hype train even further by having him replace Colby Covington at UFC 228. It was also well deserved, since Till ranked number 3 in the middleweight rankings. His pay-per-view headliner was against 3-time defending welterweight champion Tyron Woodley. 2-time defending if you don't count his first fight against Thompson, which ended in a draw. In the first round, Woodley would land multiple strikes on Darren, even having him against the cage. Till, on the other hand, landed only one single hit on Woodley. In the second round, Woodley would hit Darren with his iconic right overhand, knocking Darren to the ground. He'd beat the Brit with a barrage of punches and elbows, before putting him into a Darce choke near the end of the round. Darren would eventually tap, ending the fight and handing Darren the first loss of his MMA career. Darren would make his return to the cage at Fight Night 147 against Jorge Masvidal at the O2 Arena in London. Masvidal was returning from a year-long break after a 2-fight losing streak, so he was seen as an easy returning fight for Darren. Jorge came rushing in round 1, which caused him to hit Darren straight in the nards. As payback, Darren would knock down Jorge, along with taking him down. In round 2, Darren would poke Jorge in the eye. Jorge got back by taking Darren down before hitting him with a large left hook. This time, Darren would be knocked out cold, the only time in his UFC career. This fight was the final sign to let Darren know that welterweight wasn't for him anymore. But it wasn't the biggest sign. The biggest sign was at UFC Liverpool. While preparing for his fight against Stephen Thompson, Darren had to cut a whopping 11 pounds just the day before. Due to the rapid amount of dehydration, while on the treadmill, Darren Till momentarily went blind. His team had him laid down on the ground until he regained his sight back. Darren would take a 7-month break before his return to middleweight. His middleweight fight against former interim title challenger Kelvin Gastelum took place as UFC 244's co-main event. Darren won the bout by split decision. After half a year later, Darren would make his way to Abu Dhabi. This was because during 2020, the UFC would use the Forum on Yas Island to continue hosting events. He would headline the event against former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker. Despite a close fight, Darren would lose against Whittaker by unanimous decision. Darren was meant to face off against Jack Hermanson in December, but had to pull out of the fight due to an injury. He soon got scheduled to face Marvin Vettori at UFC on ABC2, but had to pull out again due to a broken collarbone. His troubles with staying in fights would finally end when he was set to fight against Derek Brunson at Fight Night 191. The fight was supposed to be the UFC's first fight back in the UK. However, certain protocols prevented this from happening, so the fight took place at UFC Apex. Brunson would land 3 takedowns on Darren, giving the former over 7 minutes of control time. This would all culminate when Brunson put Darren into a rear naked choke in round 3, forcing Darren to tap. Darren was on a year-long hiatus after the fight. Originally meant to fight at Fight Night 208, he was forced to withdraw because of an undisclosed injury. He came back at the UFC 282 main card to fight up-and-comer Dricus du Plessis. Dricus had more experience than Darren, with Dricus landing 100% of his takedowns on him, earning himself 5.5 minutes of control time. In round 3, Dricus put Darren into a face crank. This move forced Darren to tap due to the pressure being put onto his jaw. 2.5 months after 282, Darren Till was removed from the UFC roster. While Darren has now gotten into boxing, his MMA career has so far come to an end. If you enjoyed watching this video and want to see more like this, consider liking and subscribing.